Is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I'm your host, Josh Harris. It's the shadow of my beard that's making it look my shirt a little disheveled. It's throwing me off. But it's Friday. We've had quite the week. Got to start the show here by shouting out our boss, Hari. Too humble to put it into chat. Not too humble. He probably just slept through the end of the slate. He won the poke check for $5,000 with Islanders 1, Pittsburgh 1, Sorokin shutout, Pedersen and Fabro on the blue line, 191.9 points. So congrats to Jake there. Everyone just shout him out on Twitter. Say thanks. Good work, Jake. He loves interacting with everyone on Twitter. It's his favorite pastime. But congrats to you, Jake. I see also got to get this win in third place in that same contest for $500. That's a steep drop off from $5,000, but that's how those MME contests go. There's also a couple other stochastic Avies in the top 5. JP Sarver. So, yeah. Didn't expect 9 goals in that Leaf game. Me either. Because I had a really good lineup last night, but I got Joey Wold. And I had Sorokin in, and then I was like, oh, I have $400 left over. Goalies against Carolina have been working out. That was a miserable swap. 29-point swap. But, we don't dwell. Congrats to Jake and everyone who had good finishes last night. We have a 5-gamer tonight, and joining me to break it down in his Habs gear, Slim Cliffy. What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Congrats to Jake. Nice to see him have the takedown. A couple people had good nights. Also got a Twitter DM from Mavs Baller. It goes by Idolatry. On DraftKings, he is a avid show watcher. He went to the Fantasy Hockey World Championship last year, if I'm not mistaken, and he had a first place takedown last night for $20K. He had a Draisaitl Bouchard stack to go with Kyrou and Shen and Holloway from St. Louis. They had a pretty good night. Obviously, Evan Bouchard had a really good night on the blue line. Took down $20K last night, so congrats to him. Really good night. Congrats to Jake. Yes, like you, I did not have a good night last night. I had some fine Edmonton players. Seattle did absolutely nothing, or at least the Seattle that I played. So that sucks. I didn't think they actually played that poorly last night. Seattle's had some rough games recently. Seemed like a good matchup against Columbus with Monahan out, but Elvis Merzlikins played well. He's been a lot better over the last month-ish, which is what's helping keep them in the playoff race. But congrats to Idolatry and congrats to Jake. Congrats to everybody else that did well last night. We have 5 games on the board here tonight. Not a whole lot in terms of like lineup movement. There are a couple key injury bits that we'll get to at some point, but there is going to be one really chalky spot. It's the last game on the board, San Jose at Utah. We'll talk about that at the end of the show, but there's going to be one super, super chalky spot. One fairly chalky probably in Detroit. That's first on the board. We'll get to that here shortly. But we'll get to the injuries, like with the injuries that Utah has, and with Detroit, somewhat new line combinations, scoring well, but not blowing the doors off. I don't think it's necessary to chase the chalk tonight. So kind of an interesting slate. We have some bad teams. I don't mind slates with bad teams. As long as they're playing each other, we don't have to worry about 30% Colorado won. So not a bad slate we have here on the board. Of course, we have our rampaging Montreal Canadiens, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah, Line is still out. He's sick, but it's all right. That means more ice time for our beloved Montreal 1. Is Dobes for real? You never really know if goalies are for real until you get a long sample on them. They're just freakish human beings. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there's 2 things about goaltenders. One, at least the latest research that I saw is that it takes about 5,000 shots for a goalie sample to kind of even out, to give them, so that you have a pretty good idea of what they're going to be at the NHL level. A heavily used goalie in a season will reach 2,000 shots faced. So at best, you're probably waiting for about 3 seasons worth of data. And obviously teams can't wait that long. If you're in fantasy leagues and stuff like that, you can't wait that long. You kind of have to guess. The other thing is team quality, right? Elvis Merzlikins, we just mentioned him. He's not having a great season. Columbus is also pretty bad defensively. It's like, what would Elvis Merzlikins look like if he played for Los Angeles, if he played for Minnesota? I mean, just look at Philip Gustafson, right? Philip Gustafson having a tremendous season this season for Minnesota, last night aside. Just look at what he did in Ottawa and then compare that to what he's done by and large in Minnesota. It's night and day. So, like, the team in front of the goalie matters a lot too. We'll get to that Montreal game here shortly, but I mean, whether a goalie or not is for real, you just don't know. You hope for the best, pretty much.
I will say at this point, he's better than Caden Primo. Caden Primo had a pretty miserable season. But yeah, we have a 5-gamer. We should probably get into it. Just wanted to say thank you guys for being here, as always, supporting us through the affiliate programs, just being here, liking the videos, super chats, etc., etc. We are not one to make you go premium, but if you do choose to expand your horizons, we will say, you can click the link in the chat, use promo code Stochastic15, get you 15% off your first week or month of any subscription. We have NFL playoffs this weekend. We have PGA back in swing. Obviously hockey, NBA is going. MMA is kicking off their year this weekend, so plenty of opportunity to check out our premium products. But let's get into this slate. We're going to start with the greatest game of all time, the Chicago Blackhawks with a 2.6 total heading into Detroit. The Wings have a 3.4. This is an original 6 matchup. Who cares? These teams suck. So there's that. Blackhawks going Mikheyev, Bedard, Bertuzzi, Foligno, Dickinson, Hall, Doc, Nazar, Teravainen. Detroit going Raymond, Larkin, Marco Kasper for some reason. Then DeBrincat, Kopp, Kane, Bergen, Comfort, Tarasenko. I'm not really sure why they took Joe Veleno off the top line. I have to sneeze. But he scored the game-tying goal, I think, the other night, or game-winning goal. Got booted. I don't know if he got injured or something. But Marco Kasper's up there. I still have to sneeze. I'm thinking about bananas. There we go. You say bananas when you have to sneeze, and it goes away. In my brain. My brain needs to be donated to science. To everyone else's brain, probably won't work, but a lot of stuff going on there. From a defensive standpoint, I don't know if there's much difference between Kasper and Veleno. From an offensive standpoint, I'm not sure there's much difference between Kasper and Veleno. They're kind of the same-ish, like pretty solid defensively, doesn't add much offensively. This is a pretty good matchup going out against Bedard, Bertuzzi, Mikheyev. Like, that line's been okay. And Chicago generally hasn't been awful defensively. They're kind of middle of the pack by expected goals against per 60 and other defensive metrics. But, that line with Marco Kasper is really cheap, and they're coming in with a fair bit of ownership. And I know it's a 5-game slate, and there's some pretty chalky spots. I just don't know if I could play chalk Wings here. Like, the Blackhawks are one of the worst teams in the league, but they at least have a decent penalty kill. They're decent defensively. So, like, if you aren't thrilled about playing the Wings. I think you could get away with it if you wanted to. If you want to go to that second line, Cop, Kane, DeBrincat at 12,700, they're coming in over 15% owned. I know I just said the Blackhawks have a decent penalty kill. It's still not great by any means. So if you wanted to leave off Casper and add in a Kane or something like that, make it a little bit more expensive, make it a unique 3-man. So even if all 3 guys are 15+% owned, you'll have a lower owned combination. Excuse me. So I think you could go that route. They have a 3.4 total, which is the 3rd highest total on the slate. Like it's just like, I know they're cheap and I know they're in a decent spot. I just don't like the ownership there. I think, there's a Washington line that's a little bit more expensive that I like more. Obviously we'll talk about Utah. They're like, it's a different price range really, but I like them. Like Carolina 1. Like I'm trying to talk my way into Detroit here, and I'm struggling to do it. I'm fine with Larkin Raymond. I'm fine with a one-off to bring Cat. I'm fine with a one-off Kane. You want to make a power play stack, that's fine. I just am having a hard time getting there in my single entry. In MME, you can do what you need to do. You can go over the field, go under the field, whatever you're comfortable with. I don't love the Wings here. I think in my single entry, I won't be playing Wings, but I get the reason to play them. I just don't love it. On the Chicago side, Cliffy and I were talking this morning. He was like, you'll never guess the team with the second least amount of shots allowed on the penalty kill over the past 2 weeks. It's the Wings.
Past 5 weeks.
Past 5 weeks. Reading comprehension is hard, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that's kind of insane. So, like, you get Bedard, Bertuzzi, Mikheyev at 14.9. They're only coming in at 3%, though. That's kind of interesting to me. Just from an ownership standpoint, anytime you could get a Bedard line on a short slate at 3%, it kind of piques your interest. It's not a great matchup because Detroit's at home, but like the Cedar pairing hasn't been great since they moved Edvidson off. I actually don't mind going like Bedard, Bertuzzi, X. You know what I mean? Like if you want to play soup, go ahead. If you want to add in a defenseman, I think that's fine. At 3% on a 5-game slate, I think there is some serious merit to playing Chicago 1 here. The thing is, like, I don't mind Nazar, Doc, Teravainen, but unless you're playing Winnipeg, there's absolutely no reason to play a $9,000 line. So it really would just be that Bedard line. Again, fine with Detroit. I would make it into some sort of power play stack to get a lower owned combo. But I don't love the ownership.
Yeah, I'll start on the Detroit side. Obviously, they've had much better results under Todd McLellan. He was hired it was on Boxing Day, so the first game was on the 27th. They've scored 22 goals in the 6 games that Todd McLellan is there, which is really good, obviously. 10 of those 22 goals have been on the power play. If you look at their goals per minute at even strength under McLellan, they're 20th in the league. If this team is going to have a big night, it has to be on it. It doesn't have to be. I shouldn't say that. It probably will be because of the power play. With that said, what you mentioned about the Chicago penalty kill is right. Like over the balance of the season, it has largely been pretty good. Over the season as a whole, the Washington penalty kill is tied for the 5th fewest power play goals against per game. Over the last 6 weeks alone, the Chicago penalty kill is giving up the 4th fewest goals against per minute. So whether you look at the whole season on a per game basis or you look over pretty much under their new coach, since their new coach took over a little over a month ago, on the penalty kill. The penalty kill has been really good. That is the one thing that worries me here is like, because I think you're being a little bit kind to the Chicago defense at 5-on-5. Like, I don't think they're very good, but it's the penalty kill that
middle of the league.
Are they
middle of the league for like, okay, like say they're like 19th, right? 19th defensively 5-on-5 for how bad this team is frankly, it's a miracle.
Yeah, but they're 26th.
All right, I was being nice.
Yeah, I thought you were being like a little bit nice to the Chicago. Like where their team has been leaky defensively is at even strength. That worries me from the Detroit perspective because, like I said, the reason why they've had so much offensive success recently is the power play. That's what worries me about playing chalk Detroit. Like if this was San Jose going into Detroit and we had these ownership numbers that you're talking about, 19% on the top line, 16% on the second line, single entries are going to be guys from that game, forwards from that game over 20%. If this was San Jose going into Detroit, where San Jose takes penalties and has a bad penalty kill, I would probably be pretty gung-ho on playing the Red Wings. But this isn't San Jose going to Detroit. This is a Chicago team that legit for all the faults that they've had this year, the penalty kill has held up pretty solid. They've given up some goals recently. Maybe it's, starting to turn or something like that. I think that's what you're kind of banking on. If I'm playing Detroit tonight, I'm playing some sort of power play stack. I'm going Larkin, Raymond, Kane, Larkin, Raymond, DeBrincat. All four of them plus Cedar on the blue line and just make it a 5-man power play stack. Because I think if Detroit finds success here tonight where they break a slate and are a GPP winning lineup, I'm not sure they're going to get there at even strength. I think it's because they go 2 for 3 or 3 for 4 on the power play, something like that. Maybe they go 2 for 4, get an empty netter, like those types of things. I think it's the power play has to find success. I just think it's a pretty bad matchup. So you're asking me to play a team that's still not scoring very much at even strength. That's rotating guys on the top line because nobody's really working out. That is relying on the power play to succeed in a bad power play matchup with a lot of chalk. That's what's kind of worrying me about Detroit. I don't have any issues playing them. Somebody in the chat asked who Marco Kasper is. What I will say is that I think the best, this is going to sound like a slap in the face, but it's not. Like if Marco Kasper kind of fulfills his ceiling, he's like the next Elias Lindholm. Where like maybe he can, in a good season, he'll get you 20 goals. Lindholm had that 40-goal season, but that was Kachuk and Gaudreau carrying him. Like maybe in a good season, he'll get you 20 goals, 50 to 60 points if he can get some power play time. His value is as a two-way forward. He's an excellent defensive forward already. That was his value as a prospect. That's why I'm not super gung-ho on just stacking the even strength line. Like, yes, he can score. Obviously, he's playing with two talented players, but I'm not sure that that'll happen consistently enough for me to rely on him. I'd rather just play the power play guy. So if I'm playing Detroit, it's a power play stack. On the Chicago side, I mean, I guess it would be the top line. I'm not super concerned about any of the matchups coming back from Detroit. I think in this particular, like, you're right. You mentioned Detroit not allowing a lot of shots on the penalty kill. That has certainly been the case. They've also been giving up quite a few goals, like not a lot, but certainly above league average. Not nearly as bad as it was like a month ago, but they're still giving up some goals. And Chicago, again, for all their faults, the penalty power play has been about league average. And the Chicago team being around league average in any category offensively is a miracle, frankly. So I think Bedard, Bertuzzi, Mikheyev would be where I would go. If you want to leave Mikheyev off and add one of the power play guys like Teravainen or Donato or something like that, I think you can do that. But Detroit, I'm still not super concerned about Detroit at 5-on-5. I want to see more games from them than this recent 6-game sample. So I would probably just full stack Chicago 1. Under 4% against the Detroit Red Wings on a 5-game slate. I don't really care how bad that team is. Like, that feels like pretty good ownership to me. Like, especially if you're playing 20 max 150, this feels like a spot where I would come in at 5, 6, 7% for a line that's going to be under 4% owned. So I do like Chicago 1. I'm not so sure about the depth. Like Chicago 2 is fine if you're playing Winnipeg or something. Clearly, it's the Detroit side that I like better here. I like their power play guys, some sort of power play stack, 3 of them, 4 of them, 5 of them, whatever. On the Chicago side is the top line.
Yeah. Anyone but Mikheyev up there. Almost anyone but Mikheyev up there. And we're talking about like it a little bit differently, but it is what it is. Montreal Canadiens, 2.5 total. The disrespect from Vegas. Heading into Washington, the Capitals have a 3.5. Patty Laine still out. Got the old sickness, didn't even travel with the team. Washington going Ovechkin, Strome, Protas, Wilson, McMichael, Dubois. Montreal going Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Gallagher, Dvorak, Anderson, Doc, and Newhook. Not even going to say Pizzetta because I think in like the 4 games combined since Laine's been out, he's played like 12 minutes total. Something ridiculous like that.
It's pretty close. I think it's like 13 minutes in 3 games total.
Yeah. So like they're basically running 11-6 and Pizzetta's just there in case like some guy's just completely winded and he'll go take a 28-second shift and get out of there. Yeah, your super chat worked. Super chat test 1. Thank you for your testing the super chats on us based off your avatar there. I think you're the guy who won $20,000 last night. So congrats to you. Yeah. Thanks for testing out the super chats in our chat. But congrats to you on winning $20,000 last night. And hope heaters stay hot, as they say. So this is an interesting game. It is a front end of a back-to-back for Washington here. So it's going to be Charlie Lindgren for the Capitals tonight. Nothing against Charlie Lindgren. I happen to be a Charlie Lindgren guy. I like him much better than his brother, who is currently boat anchoring Adam Fox. However, I do think Logan Thompson's the better goalie. And, you know, here's the thing. Here's the thing with Montreal, right? With Laine out, that top line plays a lot more minutes. Yes, I had to mention Ryan. I have to mention it until he gets moved away from Fox, gets sent to the mountains of Uzbekistan, or retires. Anyway, we're fired up now. That top line is going to play a lot more minutes. Caulfield and Suzuki have been 19, 20, 21. They're fully correlated. With Laine off the power play, Caulfield has been shooting more. That matchup, Ovechkin, Strome, Protas, like, what was it the other night? That overtime game, that line got run over, and then Protas assisted the game-winning goal. It's a pretty decent matchup for Montreal 1. And of the top 6 lines here, Washington 1, Washington 2, Montreal 1, Montreal 2. Montreal 1's coming in at 7% projected, like more than half below the Ovechkin, Strome, Protas line. Washington isn't a very good defensive team. Yes, they have a great record, and the Cadbury Bunny might be the coach of the year, but they're still not good defensively. If you're going to give me Montreal 1 here, fully correlated at 7%, like I think I'm in on them. Like, it's not really a question if I'm in on them. I almost said they're my favorite line in this game, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that they are. I'm not 100% sure they are, but if you throw in ownership, they definitely are. So I do really like Montreal 1 here at 17-3. The concerns about Slavkovsky are legitimate, but I think you just play him, hope he gets a couple assists, couple blocks, you know what I mean, and you go about your day. The depth of Montreal doesn't really interest me. Again, unless you're playing Winnipeg power play or something like that, there's no real reason for a cheap line like Gallagher, Dvorak, Anderson at 8K. Like, they've played well together in 225 minutes, 3 expected goals per 60. But again, they're $8,000. So, like, unless you're power play stacking and you need a really cheap one-off that isn't going to be super chalk like Josh Doan, I think he could do like a one-off Anderson, one-off Gallagher, something like that. But it would be Montreal 1 for me on that side. On the flip side, this is where it gets a little interesting because this top line here is 19,000. The Ovechkin line, they're 15.9% projected ownership. Wilson, McMichael, Dubois, 15,600, 13% projected ownership. Now, it's a pretty good power play matchup. Yes, the Montreal penalty kill has improved, but yes, they still take a ton of penalties. So if you're going to give this Washington power play 4 or 5 opportunities, I think, they're going to score. Now, here's where it gets interesting because that top line has 2 guys on the top power play unit at 19,000, but they're going to get that Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky matchup. And, after their early season struggles, they've actually been pretty good on the season. They're still, not superb defensively, I'll say, but they're much better than the depth of Montreal. So I'm fine with Washington 1, but from a 5-on-5 standpoint, the second line is in a much better matchup. And I think people just love to hate on Pierre Dubois. He's having a very, very good season. If you're going to get depth of Montreal, you get Wilson on the top power play unit. You get, McMichael back on the wing. As a full stack, I think I prefer Washington 2 to Washington 1. That being said, I think you're going to want some power play exposure here, regardless of how the Montreal power play has improved, because they still are near the top of the league in penalties taken. So maybe you do something like Ovechkin, Wilson, McMichael, or something like that if you want more power play exposure. It's just a question of really how you want to do it. You could just do Washington 2 plus Ovechkin, Washington 2 plus Carlson plus Chikrin. I do want to try to get Ovechkin in, I think, but I'm fine with a Washington 2 stack. I'm fine with a Washington 1 stack. I just feel like if they're going to get 4 or 5 opportunities on the power play, I want to get the power play guys in. But Montreal 1, Washington 2, then Washington power play for me.
Yeah, the point about the Montreal top line and just the team getting better defensively is kind of important. Like, I think one thing it did, especially since they traded for Alex Carrier, is that they can use Carrier and shut down matchups, and that allows them to put guys like Matheson and Hudson and the bottom pair in secondary and tertiary matchups, which I think helps the team defensively. That Montreal top line, it's over 120 minutes since they were put back together. 73 shot attempts, 2.9 expected goals, 4.5 actual goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Shooting 11.6%, which might be a bit high, but it's nothing extreme. Like, we've seen Caulfield and Suzuki have high shooting percentages basically since Martin St. Louis showed up. So, with Laine out, as you mentioned, Mike Pizzetta is not going to get much ice time. These top guys like Caulfield and Suzuki have been playing like 21, 22 minutes in the last few games without. Now, those were overtime. A couple of those were overtime games, so keep that in mind. But, Suzuki for sure will be over 20 here. Well, not for sure, but it's likely going to be over 20. Caulfield high teens, Slavkovsky around 17. The thing about Slavkovsky is, like, we mentioned that there might be some sort of lingering injury with him. The thing is like, he's only 3,800. It's not like he's in the 5K range that he was earlier in the season. So, even if he doesn't have a big night, if he can get an assist and a couple shots, it's probably okay. If he gets a couple assists and a couple shots, then you're laughing. So it's not a prohibitive price by any means. The one thing that does worry me is losing Laine on the power play. They have been obviously they're generating more goals, but they're also generating more shots with him there. It's not quite the same with Kirby Dach, but it's still fine. The Caps have a great penalty kill anyway. This isn't a spot where you stack for the power play. I really do like Montreal 1. Running into that Washington second line is a little bit of a problem. They have generally been pretty good this year. We'll say Washington's been on a little bit, I don't want to call it like a slide lately, but they certainly don't look like they did in the first 6 weeks of the season, certainly up until the Ovechkin injury. So yeah, I agree with you. I do like Montreal 1. Newhook and Dach, it's a tough 2-man to play. Neither of them shoot very much. Doc gets top power play time, but they do get a rotating cast of third wheels there. They have been good without Line over the last month or so because, or without Slavkovsky, sorry. Since Line got there, they started slow, got better, but it is those Montreal third, even the fourth lines that I kind of don't mind. Like, we don't often recommend playing Montreal or, basically any fourth line, let alone the Montreal fourth line. The thing is that they're getting ice time, right? It's been 3 games without Patrick Laine. In those 3 games, Joel Armia is 5th in ice time amongst their forwards. Jake Evans is 8th. So they're basically getting like third line minutes, and Joel Armia is getting 16 minutes. Evans is getting like 15. Some of that is on the penalty kill, but like Evans gets moved up to the top line at times. Those are guys that fill in on the second line along Newhook and Doc. So if you are playing a super expensive Winnipeg, and I think once you get past that Dubois line, that's where Washington can kind of be had defensively. Like if you're matched up against Ovechkin, or if you're matched up against even that Lars Eller line, I think that's where you can kind of get at them defensively. I think that, a 2-man of like Evans and Armia and Heineman, like something like that. If you're playing super expensive Winnipeg and you need to save some salary, I think that's one of the options that's available. All that said, I do think this is a Washington game. Like they have a 3.4 total for a reason. As you mentioned, Montreal, the most penalized team in the league this season, the most penalized team in the league over the last 5 weeks. So even though the penalty kill is getting better, they're still giving up goals. Like that's the thing with Montreal, is that even though their power play is getting better, they're just outside the top 10, or penalty kill, sorry, is getting better. And it's gotten a lot better since earlier in the season. They're still just outside the top 10 for most power play goals given up per game over the last 5 weeks because they're just taking so many penalties. And the Washington power play has been good since Ovechkin came back. So I think I agree with you. If I'm playing the Caps here, I'm playing some sort of power play stack. Just, Ovechkin, Strome, and Wilson. If you want to just do that, that's fine. I'd have no problem playing like Washington 2 plus Ovechkin. You know what I mean? You'd add him to it's a 2-man power play stack with him and Wilson. That McMichael Dubois Wilson line has been really good basically all season offensively. They're certainly looking to get Ovechkin his goals to try to break the goals record. So I think that's kind of the direction I would go, is I would focus on a power play stack. Ovechkin, Wilson, and Strome, Ovechkin, Strome, and McMichael. If you want to break it up a little bit, probably, like Dubois, Wilson, Ovechkin, like something like that is probably the direction I would go with Washington. I don't have as much interest in their depth as I do on the Montreal side. So I think it's the Washington power play guys that I like best in this game. But I agree with you. Montreal won. Certainly in play here tonight, considering they're getting 7% ownership against an 11.9% top 2 stack. Like of all the lines we have on the board tonight, they're 6th by top 2 stack. And they're like 9th or 10th by ownership. So there's a nice leverage gap there. So I don't mind them, but I do think it's a Washington power play game.
Yeah. And like, that's kind of why I don't really like Chicago one, right? Because at 3.5% or whatever to 7% on a 5-game slate, it doesn't really matter. Like, give me the better line at 7%. Like, it's not even a debate. So, yeah. Vancouver Canucks with a 2.7 total heading into Carolina. The Hurricanes have a 3.3. Carolina beat the Leafs last night with Pyotr Kochetkov. So it's going to be Dustin Tokarski, Montreal Canadiens legend, in net. Vancouver looks like it's going to be Demko. He has fixed the super chat test. We have a $279.99 super chat from Idle a Train. I just butchered that, but that's what we're going with. You are nuts, by the way. Thank you very much for that. Hey, guys, just want to say thanks for helping me win a seat at the Fantasy Hockey Championships last night. I don't play regularly, but when I do, your show is so helpful. Cliffy has also helped me a bunch over the years. Cheers and thanks again. Congrats to you on winning that seat. I think you're going to be heading to Washington, D.C., they say. That sucks, but if you're No, but congrats to you. Maybe you'll see some Caps games. Maybe if it's in March, maybe you have a shot to see Ovechkin break the record if he gets hot. But hope you take down the 200K unless I qualify, and then we'll throw down in Washington D.C. But thank you again for the super chat. Cliffy has helped all of us over the years. He's given me some beer tips as well, and look how good this thing has grown in. But thank you and good luck.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that super chat. That's very, very generous. We're always, it's what we're here for. That's why we're on every day is to help people try to navigate each slate. Like I said, he qualified for the Fantasy World Championships last year, so I think this is 2 years in a row for him. Just really awesome to see. Congrats on a great night. Hope you get that big takedown, unless Josh does qualify, like he said. But yeah, otherwise, thanks a lot. Certainly appreciate it. Hopefully a successful second half of the season as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you know who you're talking to, but I'm the 36th place champion at the 2020 live final. There's only 40 people, so only 4 people had a worse lineup, and I think someone forgot to put in their lineup because they got so drunk the night before. So I had a rough go of it, but hopefully you don't. Let's talk about this Canucks Carolina Hurricanes game. Tokarski and looks like Demko. Man, like Carolina's been on the struggle bus of late defensively. They kind of broke out a little bit offensively yesterday, but nothing cures your ailments quite like the Leafs. So Vancouver is another decent defensive team. Demko hasn't really been healthy this year, but 15% on Carolina 1 is kind of funky to me. At that price and that ownership, I'd rather do something with Washington. I'd maybe rather do something with Montreal. You know what I mean? They're fine. But the thing is, right, they've been sending out that Aho Jarvis line a lot more in shutdown matchups. And if they're going to go out against that Miller-Besser line, one, that Miller-Besser line has been very, very good defensively. And two, Quinn Hughes goes out a boatload with them.
I will say, to throw a wrench in that, is they sent out
a bunch.
A lot against Matthews last night and just ran them over.
Yeah, I mean, listen. Anytime you can run over Marner, you just got to do it. It's a little bit different with JT Miller, but no, I'm just kidding. Marner sucks. But yeah, either way, right? The 15% ownership is a bit high for me. So they go out against the third line, right? Or the middle six. That Suter line, not awful. It's a very small sample. And Elias Pettersson could be back. That third line, Bluger, Sherwood, Heinen, they've been okay defensively. Again, ownership aside, you throw ownership into the equation. I think I prefer Washington, even though there is a little bit more ownership there, and I prefer Montreal. If you want to play Carolina 1, I think that's fine, but it's not something that I'm looking to do. The depth of Carolina, not exactly exciting to me. One-off Svechnikov is fine. Vancouver is a little bit more interesting because there isn't as much ownership here. Now, I think you're going to have to wait to see if Pettersson's back, because if Pettersson's back with Garland and DeBrusk, that line would give me a little bit of interest. One, because with Suter there, they're coming in at 5.4% projected. Two, if Pettersson's back, no one's going to know about it until warm-up. So it makes it a little bit more expensive, and you're going to get a fairly low-owned combo against a team that has struggled defensively, is back-to-back, and has Dustin Tokarski in net. Now, if you want to go to Miller, Besser, Lekari-Maki, it's fine. But as Cliffy noted earlier, they sent out the Stahl line almost exclusively against Top Comp last night. So if you have some fear about that, I would just defer to Garland, DeBrusk, Suter. If you want to wait and see if Pettersson's in before you make a commitment to it, I think that's fine. especially because no one's going to know until warm-ups. This does lock early, so you can make your decision before the slate locks. But if Pettersson is back, don't mind Pettersson, Garland, DeBrusk.
So the point about Carolina's defense, I think, is pretty important here. Over their last 25 games, 17th in the league by expected goals against. I don't know, like worse than teams like Ottawa, the Islanders. Like, I don't remember the last time when that was the case for Carolina. It's been a few years. And worse than that is the goals against are 28th, as Kochetkov has been really not that. He's been okay, but he's certainly been on a little bit of a slide since he returned like over the last month. It's not all Spencer Martin. The thing is Dustin Tokarski's just not been that great. Like, there's a reason why he hasn't been sticking. He hasn't stuck in the NHL. Goals saved above expected in his four games this season are in the negatives. Save percentage of .894. Like, he's just not even a Kochetkov level starter. So defense has gotten worse. It's a back-to-back worst goalie in net. Like, this seems like a decent matchup for the Vancouver side. And, Vancouver, that top line, like Miller and Lekkerimaki, Lekkerimaki was up there earlier in the season. He hasn't played a ton of games yet, but those guys in 60 minutes together, 61 shot attempts, 3.4 expected goals, 3.1 actual goals per 60 minutes. It's pretty good. Lekkerimaki may not play a lot, maybe 13, 14 minutes, but he is also under 3K on DraftKings. So it's not like you need a huge game from him. Like, he's legit a guy where an assist and a couple shots and you're fine. It would be a pretty tough matchup against Jordan Staal and company. That's the one thing that worries me. Also, it's a bad power play matchup for Vancouver. Like, the Canes, like whatever defensive issues that they have, still have a pretty good penalty kill. Second fewest shots against, like fourth fewest second fewest shot attempts against, fourth fewest shots against over the last 5 weeks. That's been the case basically for the last 5 years for this penalty kill. So one thing that's kind of holding me back on Vancouver, but your point about Elias Pettersson is an important one, I think, is that if he comes back, he's not going to be in very many lineups. 6,300 is kind of expensive, especially where he wasn't getting a consistent power play role before he got hurt. Remember, but again, like, this isn't necessarily a great power play matchup. I'm fine with playing Vancouver here, just because I don't have a lot of faith in Tokarski. There's not much ownership on them. I'm gonna be honest though, like, if I'm gonna play a low owned line, that 16 to 18K range, like, I'll probably just go play Montreal instead. You know what I mean? So I don't mind Vancouver here. I think I like Montreal better. My interest in Vancouver would be is if Elias Pettersson plays, because there's a chance he's like 1-2% at the most on this slate. He could be sub 1%. And if he can come back healthy-ish and be anything close to what he was last season, like a sub 1% Elias Pettersson on a 5-game slate, I don't care what the matchup is. Like, it's almost too good to pass up. So I'm going to have to wait to see warm-ups there. On the Carolina side, I don't mind Carolina 1 here. For this reason, it's like, if they're not going to take shutdown matchups, they're going to avoid the Quinn Hughes, JT Miller matchups. And once you get into those second and third pairs, that's when Vancouver can be beat. And Jack Roslovic has been getting some pretty decent ice time lately. Like, he was scoring earlier in the season. He's been on a little bit of a cold spell lately, but his last 5 games, 17 minutes, 19 and a half, almost 17 minutes, 12 and a half. So that hurts, but 19 and a half last night. Like, he's been getting most of the time between 17 and 20 minutes. Like, that's pretty important. That line is generating a lot of shots, has been generating some goals. Jarvis and Aho play like between 19 and 21 minutes. I don't mind Carolina 1 here. It's like, yes, there's a lot of ownership. I don't think the matchup is honestly all that bad, though, especially considering they're going to get secondary matchups on the Vancouver side. So Carolina 1 for me. I don't really have – I mean, Kotkaniemi, Robinson, and Natchez is a little interesting because at 12,300, they're filler status. So if you want to play them with a Washington or, Detroit power play or something like that, like you can fit them in. They have been decent. I was looking, just their last like 60-ish minutes, 79 shot attempts, 2.3 expected goals, only shooting 7%. Like if that came up, they'd be a lot better. Like I think they're fine as a filler. If you want to go back to the Jordan Staal line, guy had a hat trick last night, like that's fine. I'd probably rather play Kotkaniemi line, but Carolina 1, I think honestly is my favorite line in this game, even at 15%. But I would have some interest in Vancouver's Pettersson line, provided that he's in the lineup. We just have to wait to see warm-ups.
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, I know someone's going to ask me in Discord or in DMs, haven't you been off the Pettersson train all year? Yes. But if you can get him at 1% on a 5-game slate in a pretty decent matchup, I think you take that chance.
Yeah, especially a single entry, I could see not playing him. If you're playing 20 lineups, especially if you're playing 150 lineups and he's in for warm-ups, I think it's probably worth like maybe 1 out of 20 or like 5 out of 150 or something like that. Pettersson, some sort of Pettersson lineup on a slate like this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Let's get to the flowchart special. Los Angeles Kings with a 2.6 total heading into Winnipeg. The Jets have a 2.8. It is going to be Eric Comrie tonight, it looks like, for Winnipeg. They're honoring Connor Hellebuyck for winning 300 games with a gift certificate for back surgery. Eric Comrie is a league average backup. I think he has a 904 save percentage on the season. I'm pretty sure the league average this season's like 901, something like that. He's pretty close to league average is what I'm saying. And that, for a backup, that's all you want. But he's no Connor Hellebuyck. This team can be had on the penalty kill. It's a 5.5 total, but there isn't a lot of ownership, and some of these lines are pretty low owned. Like Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte, 15.8, 3.5% projected. Fiala, Ferrier, Deneau, 6.7% projected. Fogle, Byfield, Moore, 3.6% projected. I think on the Kings side, it's Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte for me. Like Turcotte makes a world of a difference on that line. For DFS purposes, it's a different story, though. He doesn't play a ton. So if you want to turn it into power play stack, I think you leave off Turcotte and you add in Fiala. Like you could add in Byfield, but like Fiala just plays the full 2 minutes. And he gets a ton of 5-on-5 ice time. So like while you could go Byfield, if you're going to leave off Turcotte, I think it would be Fiala. The 5-on-5 matchups don't really worry me. Like they've been going away a little bit from using Lauer Niederreiter in a shutdown role because it's Iafallo there instead of Appleton. That top line has never been the greatest defensively over the years. That second line is a bit leaky, you know what I mean? So there's merit to going to the Kings here. They do have a 2.6 total, but the highest road total that on the slate is Vancouver. We talked about liking Montreal. They have a 2.5. We even mentioned possibly playing Bedard. They have a 2.6. So if 2.6 road total, one of the higher on the night, it is a decent power play matchup. So I think I would go Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte. If you want to leave off Turcotte, I would add in Fiala. That's how I would attack the Kings here tonight. On the flip side, this is on paper a really brutal matchup for Winnipeg. The Kings are the best 5-on-5 team in the league. They were struggling on the penalty kill early in the season, but that was pretty much goalie driven. Now they do play tomorrow, so there is a chance it could be Big Save Dave here tonight. It's probably going to be Kemper. If I was the coach, I would probably start Kemper here tonight. And I think you're in agreement of that as well. But on a 5-game slate, you're going to give me Connor Scheifele-Velarde at 4% at 22,000. I don't think it's a single entry play. You can make it a single entry play if you want. But this is a thing. This is like a line where if I was making 20, if I was making 150, I would probably be double to even triple the field on Winnipeg one here, and just hope that they nuke. Because no one's really going to be playing them, and they're a fully correlated line, and they play a ton of minutes. So when there's no other real expensive spend up option, and they're not getting ownership, I think you take the chance there, especially in MME. So both top lines, you could do what you want with Turcotte. Honestly, I think Winnipeg 1 is the best leverage play on the night.
I'm going to start on the Kings side. I'll say the line that I have interest in from the Los Angeles side is Fiala, Laferriere, Danault. And this is why. Is they're up to about 165 minutes together, which is a reasonable sample. And they have been absolutely obliterating the competition. 69 shot attempts to 48 per 60 minutes, 3.2 expected goals to 2.2 per 60 minutes, 3.2 goals to 1.8 actual per 60 minutes. So they're scoring something like, off the top of my head, about 25% better than the league average. They're only shooting 10.5%. Like it's not really a lot. The other thing is that they're getting a lot of ice time. Over the last 5 games, each one of those players is skating at least 18 minutes a game. So despite not getting top power play time from 2 out of the 3 guys, Laferriere and Danault, they're getting a lot of ice time. And Fiala is on the top power play. The other reason is that the Kings aren't drawing power plays, and that's a problem. On the season, they're drawing the 4th fewest power play opportunities per game in the league. Since Thanksgiving, the fewest power play opportunities per game in the league. That's been 6 weeks now. If you look at just the last 5 weeks, again, the fewest power play opportunities, 19 power play opportunities in their last 12 games. They're scoring, and because the power play just isn't that great besides, they're scoring 1 power play goal every 4 games. Like, it's in that stretch. It's just been a miserable stretch on the power play, whether it's just finishing when they actually do get chances or just drawing opportunities, period. So I don't think this is necessarily a spot where I'm focused on the power play guys. I think this is about the even strength. If they get there on the power play, you have Fiala anyway, and he's usually heavily involved in their goals. So I think that's fine. And that line has been great at 5-on-5. So if you're looking for like a mid-priced-ish line, like, and you don't want to play super chalk Detroit or something like that, I think the Fiala, Danault, Laferriere line is where I would go. On the Winnipeg side, I agree with you with that top line, and it's making me wonder what I'm going to do with my lineup tonight, because this is the best offensive line on the board. Between all 10 teams that we have on the slate here tonight, this is the Winnipeg top line is the best offensive line on the board. It's just, I think you can make a pretty good argument. This is, if not the worst, this is certainly the worst matchup on the board as well, and maybe the worst matchup just in the NHL, period. That's the problem. But the power play is still rolling. It started hot and it's just kind of not stopped. Like, I was looking over their last 10 games, still scoring extremely well. The Kings don't take a ton of penalties. Winnipeg is good at drawing power plays, so maybe they can get 2, 3, maybe, hopefully, cross your fingers for 4. I think 2 or 3 is reasonable, though. That top line, like you said, they do play their minutes. Velarde on the low end will be at like 18. The other guys will probably be 20 plus. Even just over like their last 10 games, they're at 3.7 expected goals, 3.8 actual goals per 60 minutes. Like, this top line just keeps generating. They've had some easy games of late. You also have like Minnesota, Toronto, Ottawa, Colorado mixed in there. So an improved Detroit team even. So it's not like it's all been soft matchups. So I'm really wondering what to do about Winnipeg, because they're the best line on the board. And honestly, I don't think there's a close second place. If you look at the top stack and the top 2 stack percentage, they trail Utah and Washington, but it's just because of the matchup, right? So if I'm playing Winnipeg here tonight, I'm playing the top line. This is not a spot where I'm looking at the depth. I'm just wondering if it's worth playing a Winnipeg top line that is also, by far the most expensive on the board, considering they're the best line on the board, not considering matchups, and they're coming in under 5% ownership. That's just kind of what people have to kind of wrestle with a little bit here tonight. But it is a very bad matchup. Like, there's no doubt about that. But again, this is probably the best offensive line on the board. It's just whether or not you want to play them. I think I'm going to avoid Winnipeg here tonight. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm not sold on it yet, though, just because they're coming in with no ownership.
Yeah. And if this game was in Los Angeles, I'd be like, yeah, like it's an easy fade. But because it's in Winnipeg and they're going to avoid the Mikey Anderson-Gavrikov pairing for the most part, like it's another reason to like consider it, because that pair at home is disgustingly good. But
yeah, I think that's a pretty important point too, right? Is like that Anderson-Gavrikov pair is like arguably the best defensive pair in the league. Certainly make a case for it. And, the goals against, expected goals against, shots against, like all that stuff goes way up when they're off the ice, especially when they're on the road.
Yeah. So it's like if you're wavering, that's a reason to, play them. It's still a brutal matchup, but, it is still the Winnipeg top line. San Jose Sharkies. Why do they have to be on this slate? 2.4 total heading into Utah. Les Sockers have a 3.7. Dylan Guenther out indefinitely. That really sucks. Not only does that suck for tonight, it sucks for my best puck teams. It sucks for the Utah power play. It just sucks. Now, they did mix up their lines. They called up Josh Doan to replace him, but now they're going Keller, Cooley, Schmaltz, Hayton, Michelli, Doan, Bukestad, Krause, Liam O'Brien. The Sharks are going Granlund, Zetterlund, Eklund, Celebrini, Cunnin, Smith, Toffoli, Wenberg, Graf. I'm going to start on the Sharks side because it's not as important. However, Utah does take a lot of penalties. Wallman's out, and that really sucks. And they've been going to a 5-forward power play because of that. I'm not sure I could play a Macklin Celebrini line with Luke Cunnin and Will Smith. I'm okay with the Celebrini one-off for the power play exposure, but if I wanted a line that had two guys, I think I would go to Granlund, Zetterlund, Eklund. If you can't afford that, I'm fine with Wenberg to Foley. You can do whatever you want with Graf because they're both on the power play. They play decent minutes. They'll get, 16, 17 minutes.
They moved Wenberg off the power play.
I am on the struggle bus today.
Yeah. It's only the Smith Celebrini line that has two guys on the top unit.
Jesus Christ. With Luke Cunnin? Ooh, as I hit puberty for the third time this week. Yeah, so I guess it would be Celebrini Smith. Two-man. Doesn't really get the engine revving, if you know what I mean, but I guess it's fine because Utah takes a ton of penalties. I'm not running out to play the Sharks here tonight. We'll just get that out of the way now. This is a Utah game. Their top line, Keller, Cooley, Schmaltz, is now fully correlated. They're 17,100, 31.3% top two stack, 39.1% projected ownership. It's just absolutely insane. The line, like Keller, Schmaltz with Hayton, has been excellent. I don't know if there's a big sample with Cooley. I know he was up there for a little bit, but I think one of the other guys was hurt. But Cliffy was telling me about his zone entries. I'll let him talk about that. It's an excellent power play matchup. I wonder how much the power play hurts without Genther, though. If it was any other matchup, I think it would be a bigger concern. But the Sharks' penalty kill is really, really bad. Like Utah one's a great, great play. The ownership is whatever. There's ways to get different on the slate. If you want to play them, you play them. If they're your guys, you play them. If you're worried about the ownership, you can, and you still want exposure to the game. I guess you could full power play stack because if you add in Josh Doan, he's only min price. Sergachev, you know what I mean? So maybe you get a lower owned combo there. It's just like, I don't want to say Utah's a bad team, but like on bigger slates where we have to decide between 30% Colorado 1 or not, at least you know Colorado 1 has elite players on it. Like, yes, Keller's a great player. Yes, Schmaltz is a good player. Cooley, at least real hockey-wise, is a good player. But it's like there's not an elite guy on the team, and you're just like 40%. In single entry, I would willing to bet that Clayton Keller pushes 50%. I'm leaning towards playing them, but I'm not just going to stack Utah 1 and call it a day. I'm going to either add in Josh Doan or Sergachev or just straight on full-on power play stack. Now, if you are playing Winnipeg 1, I think you can go to the second line of Hayton, Michelli, Doan at 9,700. They're coming in under 10% projected. Because not only is it a great power play matchup, it is a great 5-on-5 matchup. And it's not Askarov in net, it's Alexander Georgiev. So as much as I want the power play guys in there, if you can't afford it and you still want exposure to it, you just stack Utah 2. But for me, I think I'm leaning towards playing them, but I'm not just straight up full stacking Utah 1 and calling it a day. I'm adding in 1 or 2 other guys.
Yeah, I think that's the important point about Utah is like, I'm not just playing a 40% top line and then just moving along. Like if I'm playing Utah here tonight, it's probably some sort of power play stack. Add in Doan, add in Sergachev, make it a 5-man. Like you said, it's a really good power play matchup for them. Now, how much it's effective with Genther, I do think is a real thing because he was kind of the shooter on the power play, right? Like he has as many power play goals as Schmaltz and Keller do combined. So he was a pretty important person on, not a point person. He was a pretty important person on that power play. So I would go like Keller, Cooley, Schmaltz, Doan, Sergachev, or Keller, Cooley, Schmaltz, Sergachev, maybe even double defense with like Ian Cole or Kesselring or something like that. You know what I mean? I'm not just playing Utah 1 and moving along, not at 40% ownership. It is a great 5-on-5 matchup. It is a really good power play matchup. It is Georgiev and not Askarov, which is very important because Askarov has been much better. So the ownership obviously is a concern, especially if you're in like smaller single entries. Like I do think that line can push towards 50%. But I would just make it a power play stack, make it a full onslaught 6-man Josh stack, top line plus Michelli and Doan plus Sergachev, top line plus Doan plus double defenseman, 6-man stack them if you want. I think that's the way I would attack Utah tonight rather than just playing the top line. Do you want to play the second line and put them with Winnipeg? I think that's okay because Winnipeg is such low ownership. But I think if I'm playing Utah, especially because of how good of a power play matchup it is, it's the top line plus Doan, the top line plus Sergachev, the top line plus both of them, 6-man stack with the top line, like that type of thing, rather than just playing the top line. On the San Jose side, I don't mind Granlund, Zetterlund, Eklund. The thing is like when you're looking in that 12 to 15K range, like on this slate here tonight, there are options, even if you don't want to play chalk Detroit. Like there's a couple Los Angeles lines, right? The Fiala line's 14,200. The Byfield line is even cheaper. There's a couple Carolina lines that you can play. If you want to play Detroit too, you can do that, even though I probably wouldn't. Like there are other spots that I think I'd rather go to. I think I would approach San Jose the same way that I would approach Utah, and that would be focusing on the power play guys. Now, if that means playing Celebrini, Cunnin, and Smith, Godspeed. I would probably do something like Celebrini, Smith, and Granlund, Celebrini, Smith, and Toffoli. I would focus on the power play. because San Jose's been like league average at drawing power plays over the last 6 weeks, which is fine considering how many penalties Utah takes, which is a lot. So I would focus on the power play guys on either side because I think it's a good power play matchup for both sides. And I really don't have any interest in playing Luke Cunnin. So like Celebrini Smith to Foley, Celebrini Smith, Granlund, something like that is what I would do if I was playing San Jose here. But like I said, I just think that there are other lines in that price range that I would rather play.
Yeah. Don't really want to bank one out on the Sharks, but like, yeah, one or two guys on that power play because the Soakers parade to the box is fine. Let's talk about some defensemen here. Top of the board, Quinn Hughes is 8K. It's a little bit of a tougher pill to swallow on this slate. You have Morrissey and Carlson above 6K. I don't mind Morrissey. I think I'd just defer to the Washington power play guys here, Carlson and Chychrun. Sergachev, obviously, in a great spot. I think if I was spending up, it would be for either Carlson or Chychrun, and then Morrissey, and then Hughes. Like, I would save Hughes if I was playing Vancouver. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking, like, I don't really have a ton of interest in the expensive defenseman here tonight. Like, obviously, there's only 3 guys, 6K and above. It is Hughes, Carlson, and Morrissey. Carlson has the best point per dollar projection. Hughes has the best overall projection. Again, I worry about Hughes and his hand injury. He was shooting a bit last game, but I do worry about that long term. I would probably play Carlson just because I do think it's a pretty bad matchup for the Jets. But for me, there's more interest in that mid-price range. Like Brent Burns running top power play for Carolina now. I think that's pretty important. Moritz Seider in a pretty good spot against Chicago, and he gets a lot of minutes. Mikhail Sergachev, obviously at home in a great spot against San Jose. Jacob Chychrun, as you mentioned, power play time, and he shoots a lot. Even Seth Jones, for all the minutes that he plays, and Chicago's power play isn't bad. And it's a decent power play matchup. So I think there are a lot of guys in like that. Even Alex Vlasic, I think, is playable, even though I'm not specifically targeting him. I think he's a little too expensive, but I think he is playable. Like, there are a lot of guys in that 4 to 6K range that I'd rather play than in that 6K plus. For the cheap guys like Ian Cole, still getting good ice time for Utah in a good matchup. Jacob Slavin, really cheap now. He's fine. Timothy Liljegren getting top power play time for San Jose. Not sure he's going to do a whole lot, but at least he's cheap enough. Simon Edvinsson, not getting the ice time that he was a month ago, but that's also reflected in his price. Jalen Chatfield getting more ice time with Shane Gostisbehere out. Been like 21 minutes a game lately. Eric Gustafsson has been getting more ice time with Jeff Petrie injured, so he's fine if you need a super cheap guy from the Detroit defense like Alex Carrier. Still getting good ice time for Chicago. Sorry. Dylan Sandberg is back for Winnipeg. He is min price. I do worry about ice time a little bit, but he was getting about 20 minutes a game before he got hurt. If you're lucky, you can get like 1.5 shots, 1.5 blocks from him per game. It's not that bad for if you need a guy at stone mid price.
Yep. Let's talk about goalies. I hate goalies so much. The top end is not really ideal here tonight. It's Vejmelka, Lindgren, Talbot, Tokarski, Comrie. Not exactly the murderer's row of goalies. I don't mind Talbot. Lindgren's okay. I think the question is, what do you want to do with Vejmelka, right? Because he's been good this season, but the amount of penalties that Utah takes concerns me at that price. I'm more likely to play him at 7,500 than 8,400. You know what I mean? Because you obviously don't need as much. I guess he's fine. I just worry about his upside in GPPs. I think if you're spending down, Demko makes some sense. I know he hasn't been great this season, but he has the back of the baseball card. You just got to hope he's healthy. interesting choice would be Dobes here tonight. I think he's fine. I wouldn't expect, a 982 save percentage again. That's his save percentage for those first 2 games in the NHL. But I think despite what the odds say, this is a somewhat winnable game. Maybe he sees enough volume to get a saves bonus, but I prefer Dobes to Georgiev. Mrazek, I think, is okay if you aren't playing Detroit. Like, there isn't a goalie that I love. There's some that I would play. If you have a guy that you like, you play him. I'm not in love with anybody here tonight.
Yeah, the issue with Vejmelka is shot volume. Like, Utah's actually good defensively. San Jose doesn't create a ton of volume. And like, I was just looking, Vejmelka is 6th in the league in save percentage amongst regular starters this season. And he has, I think it's 3 20-point DK nights on the season. Because 1, Utah doesn't score enough to get him a ton of wins. And 2, they don't give up a ton of shots. Like, that's my concern with Vejmelka. With all that said, he is the top projected goalie on Stochastic here tonight. And it's over 2 full points higher than the next closest goalie. So, like, in the sense that anything can happen on any given night. So that's, you always do worry about that. I don't think Vejmelka gets blown up. Like, I think maybe worst case scenarios, like 3 goals on 22 shots, which obviously isn't a good night, but it wouldn't end your night. You know what I mean? I don't think he gets chased allowing 4 goals on 7 shots in the first period or something like that. Like, I don't think that's the concern. So, like, you might be able to bank on 10 to 15 points. And if that's good enough, then that's good enough. But he does have the top projection. So if you have the 8,400, I think he's fine. I would probably prefer to play Talbot here. I think Demko is okay. The Canucks also don't give up a ton of shots. That's the one thing that kind of worries me. And it's not like Demko's been good since he returned from injury this season anyway. So I don't know, man. I'm with you. There aren't really any goalies on the board that I really like here tonight. I don't think I would play Peter Mrazek, just because I do worry that Detroit's power play is enough to kind of ruin any night that he might be able to put up. That's basically, and I don't think I would play Tokarski either. I worry about shot volume plus just goalie talent. So those are basically the goalies from Chicago and Carolina are the only goalies that I wouldn't have interest in. For me, it's probably going to be between Vejmelka, Talbot, and Dobish from Montreal. Those are the 3 goalies that I'm kind of looking at here. But I'm really not locked into one. Like, this is just goalie slates in general aren't good. This one's absolutely miserable.
Yeah, and just to hammer home your point about the shot volume, Vejmelka sees since American Thanksgiving, he's played 15 games. He's had 2 games, 18 points or above. He's had 7 under 10, and he's won some of those games. So,
I think that's kind of the issue is like 2 goals on 19 shots and then gets the win. It's like, okay, you get like 9-10 points or whatever, but it wouldn't ruin your night, but it's not a slate breaking performance, obviously.
Yeah. So if you like a guy, you play him, I guess, is what we're getting at here. We will be back tomorrow, regular time, 2 p.m. Eastern, to break down the Saturday slate. Who you liking for your hat trick pick?
I don't think maybe I picked a Detroit player this year. I can't remember all of them. I'm going to Detroit. I'm just going with the chalk. I'm going Lucas Raymond.
I'm going to go way off the board here. It's something I usually do anyway. It's a good power play matchup for him. Going Macklin Celebrini.
That would be something.
He's got the talent to do it, and it's a good power play spot. It's just their power play sucks without Wallman.
So does the rest of the team.
Yes, they do. Sharks suck. At least they're somewhat fun compared to last year. Anyway, don't want to talk about it anymore. We will be back tomorrow. Good luck, everybody. We'll see you in Discord. And, good luck.
Good luck tonight, everyone.